Today we're going to take a look at some tools that we can use to help our program make decisions. And to give you a little bit of context, this is the in-class problem that we're going to solve. We're going to create a little sub-shop app. It's going to allow us to, I'm not going to say completely customize our subs, but give us some flexibility. So we want the customer to come in and basically use this app, designate what they want on the sub, and then we'll give them a total. If they want to, they can even order multiple copies of that sub, but no customizations. You get one type of sub, and if you want 10 copies, we'll give you 10, but we can't take the tomatoes off the 7th one. We can't do that. That gets into a whole lot more complexity again that we don't want. So not 100% real world. We are going to ask the customer to put in their phone number and their name. We want to capture the date. Again, the customer can only order one type of sandwich. They get to pick what kind of bread they want. And depending on the type of bread, we charge them a little bit more. They get to pick what kind of meat they want on the sandwich. No, there's no combinations, though you can leave the meat out altogether and we'll give you just veggies. Again, the price is different. Then you can add extra stuff like lettuce and tomatoes and mayonnaise and cheese for extra cost. And if you want, we'll charge you 75 cents for soda. So obviously our program needs to make some decisions here. Our program needs to allow the user to make choices, first of all, and then behind the scenes, the program, when it's figuring out what's the price of the sandwich, it's going to have to figure out which bread type did they pick, which meat type did they pick, did they add any additional items, and then if they did, which ones, and did they want a soda? And then finally, how many of all of those did they want? In the past, I've had you as a group create an IOP for this and maybe even a toe chart for this. I think we're going to bypass that in the interest of time. So let's take a look at some of the tools, at least on a form, that we could have used in that IOP. And actually, Pam, if you'd do me a favor, you walk up there and erase the board. Let's do a quick IOP. And just the I and the O's. What outputs do we see and what inputs do we see? If you just make a column of inputs and document them up there, then maybe we'll use them later. And actually, well, you can just stand there for just a second and it'll look marvelous. And then we'll come back to you in just a second. All right, what kind of options do we have? In my notes here, let me make that a little bigger. Some of the options that we have, one of the most common types of ways for users to make a multi-choice selection is to use radio buttons. Another one is checkboxes. What's the difference between a radio button and a checkbox? See it?
Radio buttons, you can only select one. Checkboxes, you can select multiple.
Good. Radio buttons, I only get to pick one. I was waiting for you to say radio buttons are round and checkboxes are square, which is also true in most cases, but it's the way they behave that we're interested in. All right. Radio buttons, you get a bunch of choices, you get to pick one. Radio buttons by default, when you pick one radio button, if another one is on, it turns them off automatically. Magic. Checkboxes, you can select them in any combination. So given that information, so Pam doesn't get too tired up there, what input types do we see here? We need the customer's first name and last name. Very rare that you put them together. Very often a problem description like this says we need the customer's name. My first question is, what does that mean? First name, last name, middle initial? You want a title for that? Doctor, Mr., Ms.? You want a suffix, the third, junior? We're going to keep it simple, first name and last name. We need their phone number. What I'm doing is just reading through this, and except for the word program, looking for nouns. We need the order date. And we need bread type. So if you could add bread type to that. Now let's think about that. Did you miss the order date? I'm sorry. Bread type. If we were moving into the toe chart now, What would I use for first name and last name, a text box? What would I use for the order date, the date picker, phone number, text box? What about the bread type?
Radio button.
Because I can only pick, yes, radio buttons, because I can only pick one type of bread. Just came from Herbert's, I tried this. Can I have the honey wheat on the bottom and the plain on the top? They go, no. Just testing.
Did you really do that?
No. Okay, so we can only have one type of bread. What about the meat type? In this case, text box. What happens when they don't type turkey right? Ew. Check boxes, can I mix my meat? Not in the sandwich shop. Okay, just like at Herbert's, I can't go in there and say, can I have half the meat from a Tullius and half the meats from a
Subway.
That's why you go to Subway, take your pick. Even there, you can't mix meatballs with ham. Okay, so no. So what kind of object am I using for this?
I work there. You can do whatever you want.
Radio buttons. All right. Now the additional items, I can have lettuce, tomatoes, and mayo, and cheese in any combination. So so we got bread type and meat type, and condiments? Sure. We'll go with that. I'm not sure cheese is a condiment, but we'll go with it.
Yeah.
It is some shop, it's a condiment.
It's a condiment, okay. But there we're going to use check boxes. And so remember, all these inputs, they just flow right over to the toe chart, right? And for each one of those, we then have to figure out what kind of an object, what are we going to call it? Text first name, text last name, text phone number, DTP order date. But when we get to the bread type, so far, every time we transferred stuff over to the toe chart, for every one of the inputs, there was one object. But when we're looking at the bread type, we're going to need 3 radio buttons. So while you're doing your lab today, I'm going to kind of tweak that and turn it into a toe chart so we have a little bit of a plan. But the bread type that she has listed as an input turns into 3 different objects. The meat type turns into 4 different objects. The condiments turn into 4 different objects. We also need to know if they want a soda, so just put soda question mark. And finally, we want a quantity. How many of these do you want? When the user clicks the calculate button, the program should display the total cost of the order. So there's one output. It is a big pile of inputs, and that's pretty common, right? Big pile of inputs, and in the output column, there's one. Total. How much is this going to cost me? Maybe. I don't have to walk too far away from my microphone. So radio buttons, check boxes. One other thing I want to introduce you to, then I'm going to turn you loose on a lab. Good news is it's not as brain taxing as the last one was. I tell you what to do and you do it and you see what happens instead of think about this, how would you solve the problem? That wasn't easy, was it? I was surprised. I thought it would be a little easier, but that's again me having done this for a bunch of years. If I give you that same lab again next year, you'll have it done in 10 minutes. You'll have the experience, the logic experience that you need to walk through those if statements. I bet if I give it to you 3 weeks from now, you'll finish it a whole lot faster. So a couple other things you need to know, then I'm going to turn you loose on the lab. Check boxes, I can pick in any combination. Been forcing you in Unit 4 to do a little research on panels and group boxes. These are called containers in Visual Studio because they contain other objects. And you're going to learn in the lab how to create these and how to get stuff inside and what you can do with them. There's really not too much difference between them that I've found, except a panel doesn't have text. Most of you in your first program that you submitted gave me group boxes because you can add text to them. And there's a title on the top of the group box. In the group box, you can take the text out and it basically becomes a panel. I normally use group boxes for radio buttons because then I can write across the top, meat type, bread type, soda flavors, whatever. Oh, that was one that we're missing up there is a soda flavor. I'll get it. Kind of blew past it. Panels, however, do have a border style property, so we can actually take the border off of a panel. Why would I want to have a panel with no border? What's the point? Puts all the objects that are inside in a group. And I can still hide the panel. And when I hide the panel, the whole panel goes away, including all the stuff that's inside. So it's kind of like an invisible border around objects, and we'll use that mostly next semester. Put an invisible border around objects so that when it's time to hide them, we just give one command, hide the panel, all the objects go away. Rachel?
So you could theoretically say, do you want a soda? If they click yes, then the
soda period, that's what we're going to do as a matter of fact. Okay? In this lab that you're writing, you're going to lay out this form for simple subs, but you're not going to write any code for it. We're going to do that together, okay, in class. And then later on, one of the things we'll make it do, if they say, yes, I want a soda, a group box appears with the soda flavors, the root beer, the lemon lime, the cola, whatever it was, included inside there. So group boxes, I can put captions on. I can hide either one. But the panel allows me to make an invisible border, if you will, around stuff so you don't have to necessarily mess up your form to put something into a group. Panels also have a border style. That way we can hide them, but we can change the colors. The downside to group boxes is you can't change the colors of the border. You get a border color. Border color depends on what kind of background you put on it or you put behind it. So there's limits to what you can do with a group box. So those are the three different tools that we're going to put together in different kinds of ways to solve our decision-making processes. You'll learn how to add them and move them around. That's part of the lab. Checkboxes, we'll talk more about checkboxes and radio buttons again once you're done with the lab. I'm kind of hoping that this one you'll have done by 5 o'clock, but again, it's only me here, so I'm not sure I can check you off that fast, but let's get you started. The lab itself is available either on my website, it should also be on OneDrive. There's a starter file. So you want to download that starter file. So I'm going under assignments on my website. Here's Unit 5. These are the instructions. You may again work together in pairs if you wish. So one of you might have the instructions up on one screen while the other downloads and unzips and opens up the starter. That already has a form, it's already centered, it's got a title, it's got Garfield, it's got a couple of objects ready to go, and then you're going to mess with them. That lab is due today. If it takes you longer than I expected, then that's all we're doing today. But I think this one will be a little easier than the last one. Questions? Okay, go ahead and get started.